The Marching Roundtable is proud to be an official media partner of Drum Corps International.
Thanks for coming to the Marching Roundtable YouTube channel, sharing great information to help you succeed in all the marching arts. While you're here, we hope you'll subscribe. Hi, this is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts and the host of the Marching Roundtable podcast. On this series, we talk with a private lesson teacher and performer for each instrument to tell you what you need to know to be more effective in working with those students. We hope you enjoy the series.
While they're setting up the instrument, the first thing they should do is pour water into that reed cup and put the reed in it and let that soak during the process of assembling the instrument, seat strap, vocal, all those things. And the last thing they do after they sit down in their seat strap underneath them and bassoon in their lap, is to then pick up the reed, shake the water out of the inside of it, put it on top, and then play it. And even a professional bassoonist is one who will be soaking multiple reeds when they first set up the instrument, and will even test the reeds off of the vocal, figure out which one they feel like, okay, well, this is going to be my strongest contender for today, put that one on, and then begin their warm-up process. The bassoon, you will have one note that is 2 keys, and then the note above that, you're throwing down every single finger you have, and then the note above that, you're taking half of them away again. And that flip-flop progression can happen for a series of almost an entire octave. Now, with that being said, you are going to have bassoon players, depending on the model of their instrument, depending on what it's made out of. There are fingerings that are going to work for some instruments and some that don't. A lot of it boils down to what is the quality of the sound, what is the intonation, or again, most importantly, do you get the same sound every single time?
This podcast is sponsored by FJM, Fred J. Miller Incorporated, found at fjminc.com. Hey everybody, this is Tim Hinton, the Beast of the Marching Arts, and we're talking bassoon today, and I've really been looking forward to this one. With me today is Lumen Guthrie. Lumen, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. How are you doing today?
I am great. So you are the bassoon guru for this series, and you're going to give us all kinds of great tips on the bassoon. So first off, just introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Lumen Guthrie. I just finished my Master's of Music Education with a concentration in bassoon performance from Westchester University's Wells School of Music. That was really just an amazing time, and I've been here in the Westchester area ever since I graduated. I got my undergrad at Towson University, working a lot with John Olauskas in the marching arts, kind of fell in love with it from there, and also Terry Ewell, just a pivotal instructor for both the bassoon, but also online education as well. The strides that he has made for teaching music online has just been amazing, and a lot of people are following suit with that. I'm very into the marching arts. Obviously, I've been involved with the Raiders Drum and Bugle Corps, as well as Pacific Crest and the Bushwhackers as well. And I am also involved in live performing, composition, and in terms of bassoon, just finished up that master's program, as well as one thing I was very fortunate to do was to do the New Bassoon Institute in Ann Arbor, Michigan, at the University of Michigan. The program was directed by Jeffrey Lehman, but had some other great, amazing instructors. And as anyone who really loves their instrument, you really cannot ask for anything less than an entire week of just great people and great music. So that was such an amazing time up there.
What great experiences you've had. And I love how varied it is. And you're being a musician and a creative person on all these levels. So that's really cool. So Lumen, thank you so much for being with me today. Okay, so here's the setup, everybody. I'm an instructor, a band director, whatever. I'm standing on the podium. There is the band. You're probably thinking concert band. And they're sitting really close to me, most likely, are some students playing the bassoon. And so I've asked Lumen to tell us, what would you want me to know? So Lumen, what's the first thing that you would want me to know about the bassoon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure many of you have programs out there where you have just an excellent and gifted bassoonist, or maybe a bassoonist who's just started on the instrument but has immediately fallen in love with it. It really is just such a fun and unique sounding instrument. All the parts match that energy as well when it's written properly. So a lot of composers, especially in developing bands, will kind of take like the trombone or the tuba line and copy paste it, and you get some unique challenges for that. And then you've also got the other route where you get a lot of copy and pasting from like clarinet or saxophone, because you're thinking, oh, woodwinds, so they all can kind of move together. Your developing bassoonists will see challenges in either one of those directions, either saxophone, clarinet. The dexterity and the technical abilities are things that the developing bassoonist just doesn't quite resonate with. They run into some unique challenges when it comes to playing intense scalar passages most of the time. On the other hand, the bassoon is definitely not an instrument that should be just seen as a bass instrument. You should not see them as the instrument that just plays donuts below the staff like the tuba does. It really does have a completely unique role of their own. So if I were to say anything about approaching how a bassoon sounds in the audience, or as a director, you should absolutely see them as a bassoon and nothing else. So approach that as not, oh, it's a clarinet but double reed. Oh, it's a trombone but woodwind. No, see it as a bassoon. That is really first and foremost the first thing that I would say on that matter.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned sort of developing band music, and I can see how that would happen very easily, is that they're not thinking of it as its own unique thing. And so it's sort of following along on another part that's maybe not so appropriate for it. So that's a good thing to know, is think of it unto itself. So the bassoon is in a very unique spot in the band because it does a lot of things. Like it can play high, it can play low, it can play all kinds of stuff. So I'm sure, though, that great composers for orchestra or for wind band music find ways to use it appropriately.
Yeah, no, I think that one thing that gets a bassoonist really, really excited is when the composer just understands what it means to be a bassoonist. So like anytime we see strings of eighth notes bouncing up and down, you get fifths, you get octaves or scalar passages. At kind of like anywhere that 120 to 144 range, all staccato markings, all long strings. That is like, waking up on Christmas morning and seeing, that suspiciously bike-shaped present sitting in the corner. That is what we are there to do. But also like balancing that fun and goofy kind of nature of the bassoon that really stems back from that, Baroque like barnyard style that it was really known for, all the way to classical romantic early 20th period, where the composers really started to experiment with the tenor clef for the bassoon, and really just this duality and this double nature of the instrument, how we can go from fun and bouncy all the way to thinking solos like Rite of Spring and Scheherazade. It is really just it's a coin with two sides, and the two sides are in the same hand and can be really, really just the spectrum of possibilities that you really, we think of ourselves as educators. We think of ourselves as student-centered. We also have to think of ourselves as student-centered and instrument-centered too, So in the same way that 1 year you might have a set of warm-ups that really, really help your band, and then new students come in, and then you have new repertoire that you're assigning. Your solutions for 1 year may not be the exact same for the year after that as well. So I would really, really advise instructors for a large ensemble to really see the unique strengths and characteristics of both the musician and also the instrument that they're holding.
Okay, and just a little bit of a side. You said something about barnyard. What can you explain that? Was it Baroque barnyard? Is what you said?
Yeah. So if we're really thinking back to the early days of like chamber music, you're thinking Baroque music, and you're thinking this very light and charming side of the bassoon that existed. And there are things that I as a performer really understand and really convey with the bassoon, but there are ways that I could not articulate it any better than the series online. I believe it's the London Symphony Orchestra. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but they have a series online where they introduce period instruments, and the Baroque bassoon is really what you should watch if you want to understand the roots of our instrument and where things really started with our instrument, which was the bassoon did kind of start as an outdoor instrument. It was in the same way that we were separating kind of like the sophisticated and operatic music of the Baroque period from the fun chamber. You know, you're thinking of large social gatherings, indoors and outdoors. The bassoon was really kind of seen as that latter before it was really, really harnessed for both of them. Again, could not be explained better than that series that I mentioned online from earlier. But yeah, thinking of the split personalities of the bassoon.
Okay, I love it. So my impression is that if I'm a typical director or instructor standing on a podium in front of the band, I probably know less about the bassoon than almost any other instrument. It's sort of my impression, just because it's a unique instrument, and band directors tend to have a lot more experience on either a brass instrument or clarinet or flute, you know, like that. So I felt like this conversation we're having is especially going to be helpful to people. So I love that context for how we're going to be thinking about the bassoon. What's the next thing that you might want somebody to know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what some directors may have seen, especially when you have programs that are somewhat self-sufficient, you know, if you've stuck with the program for a number of years, you're really starting to grow an understanding of the ensemble sound and the characteristics that every musician is bringing in. And you may even have a bassoonist who's been there for a number of years and really understands their role in the ensemble and has a developed musicianship. You know, they have the ear, that kind of thing. But you may honestly notice, you know, come November, December, maybe even festival season in the spring, you have that bassoonist that understands their role, but for some reason lately, they're just not totally harnessing their abilities. Like you're like, all right, well, things are out of tune. You know, starting your notes is kind of an issue right now. Your dynamic range has soft. Like, what is going on? Like, talk to me. Is everything all right at home? You know, am I doing something wrong? And 9 times out of 10, I will tell you right now that it is the reed. It is the reed of the instrument. Is the first and foremost battle of why the player is not expressing their full capabilities for the ensemble. And if you're looking for the easiest answer on how to address that, so am I, because reeds are such a talking point for bassoonists from the day they pick up their instrument for the first time all the way to the professionals who have been playing for decades in major ensembles. The reed is you know, for the best way that I can put it, all of my colleagues when I was both in undergrad and graduate school, for our studio hours and our master classes and stuff like that we do throughout the year, you know, if you picture yourself in the saxophone studio or the percussion studio or vocal or keyboard or whatever it is, and you sit down, you're thinking back to when you sat down for your first studio hour and you're watching some junior or some senior that's getting up pretty early in the semester and already has something prepared. They're playing, they're getting feedback, and everyone is taking notes and all those things. We maybe got that, I would say, once every 2 or 3 dozen studio hours as a bassoonist. It is not very common that bassoon studios will spend their studio time playing for each other, because we have to spend so much time working on our reeds, and our double reed friends, the oboes, definitely get an understanding of that as well. Everything starts with the reed. We take such intensive care on learning about the kind of reeds that we need specifically. And then the next step is to get that reed every single time. And it really is not a, you know, make one fix and everything is okay. The one thing I can tell you is don't look for that one fix, because reeds have a mind of their own. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got when I learned that, like, you can make adjustments to reeds, you know, you can scrape them, you can open or close them, you can pinch the wires, things like that. The best advice I got for adjusting my reeds was to not adjust my reeds. If your reed is giving you a problem, you know, you can switch and put that reed away. That's why bassoonists will typically soak 2 or 3 reeds for a rehearsal, even if they're only using one. It's because you never really know what one reed is going to do for you on one day. Now, you understand, well, I prefer a thicker reed, I prefer a thinner tip, you know, I prefer this hardness of cane, all of those things. A developed bassoonist will really have an understanding for those. But again, you know, everything from the weather, the time of day, the elevation, how old your reed is, all of those things will affect how it can sound on Monday versus Tuesday versus Wednesday. And really the best advice is if you're playing on a reed and every single time it's giving you the same issues for, I would say, about a week, well, then that would probably be the time to make adjustments, make accommodations for it. Now, if the student has a private instructor, that's probably going to be the person who's going to be the most reliable to take care of those adjustments. If you, as a director, are really looking to help your bassoonist on that, the best thing that you can do is give it to the hands of someone who knows what they're doing. It's the kind of thing where the smallest adjustment could probably make it unplayable. You know, we are going for percentages of fractions of decimals worth of adjustments to make a big difference when we make those adjustments. But it's a matter of whether or not you're going to make that adjustment in the first place.
Wow. I mean, that was very clearly stated, but I'm like getting anxious thinking about it because I'm like such a fickle instrument. You know what I mean? Like this part of the instrument is so precarious. And we know that double reed players in general have this kind of relationship with their reeds and how precarious it is. But you just said it in a way that I don't think I've ever quite heard as clear before. So as most of the directors or instructors that are standing in front of the band, they are not qualified to try to help with that. But maybe, like, what is my comment? Maybe try another read, or, hey, when is your next lesson?
Yeah.
Like, how can I best help with that? Or perhaps my question would be, how can I help a student who's struggling with their read? You know, like, I don't want them to, to freak them out more.
Yeah. So really the best thing for that is, you know, if you're having read problems throughout the day, the best thing you can do is suggest to kind of soak their reed for a little bit, you know. So they should have what is either, like, you know, for lack of better words, there are reed soaking cups, and some students may invest in one of those, especially one of my colleagues at graduate school. He has the one that clips onto the stand. That's really convenient because you can boop, 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 and back in. And, you know, you have professional bassoonists who just don't bother with that. And for lack of better words, they will soak them in things like shot glasses or empty pill cases, because it's just like a small cup that is reed shaped that they can carry around and fill with water. I won't begin to get into the other practices that some bassoonists will do with soaking their reeds, but for lack of better words, well, let's say there are some solutions easier than taking that shot glass and walking to the trash can and dumping it out. And there's one place that all of that reed water has already been, that sometimes you just need an extra sip after rehearsal. Now, that is not everyone's cup of tea, and I definitely don't suggest doing that if you're not interested in it, but it's something that I've seen some people do before.
All right. We are getting some insights into bassoon players here that I don't think I quite expected. But my point is, like for example, Lumen, when I was talking to the clarinet people, yeah, they were talking about how their big challenge is often to get young players to put enough of the mouthpiece in their mouth. But when you do, it can squeak. And so then, to me, the important thing was to let everybody know, okay, all of us starting students, the clarinets are going to squeak some because this is hard. You know, they're trying to figure out this. In other words, let it be a point of embarrassment or contention or anything for those students as they're trying to learn. So I feel like the same thing maybe applies here. Like, maybe we need to talk to and educate our band students in general about how hard it is to get the reed to behave or to figure out how, you know what I mean? Like, am I on the right track with that? Is that helpful to bassoon players?
Yeah. And, you know, I think I speak for every instrument, that we all have the unique challenge of how do we get the instrument to sound like what we want it to sound like at the very first split second every single time. It just so happens that it's probably more of a leading preoccupation for some instruments other than others. I don't want to say that I have the privilege of saying the bassoonists get that trophy, but from my experience with all the instruments that I have played, I do have to say that, you know, with the amount of time I've spent playing the bassoon, it is still something I think about, versus, you know, brass instruments are something that I'm quite confident in getting that sound every time, especially in a core setting or something like that. But with bassoon, it is such a unique challenge, and there are way more pieces of advice that I'll get to in a little bit. However, going back to the reed thing, really a lot of it starts before rehearsal. So the best the best thing I can say from the very first starting point is know where your student is getting their reads. There are some reed makers that sell nationwide. If you're looking for my personal recommendations, I have found very great success in Forest's Music. They're based out of California. And then Miller Marketing in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is actually not very far from where I am right now. So you can buy them online. However, sometimes it's fun to visit his office in person and see all of the equipment that just kind of sits in his office. It's a very cool experience to see a professional reed maker, like all of their equipment and things like that. It is an office. It is entire office dedicated to reed making. So know where they're getting their reeds from. And it really should be a non-negotiable for your developing bassoonists that they are soaking their reeds before they play them. Now, a reed that just came out of the container that they bought online and got shipped to them, they should err on the side of the very first time they take it out of the case. I would suggest personally 10 minutes of soaking before they play it. And it is going to be, kind of that dog tugging you on the leash for that walk when they first play on that new reed. The cane is still quite thick. And the pores are just beginning to permeate as a playing reed. The reed has been soaking during the making process, but now the reed is still learning what it means to be a reed. The material is going to be quite thick. There's going to be lots of vibrations in the embouchure and in the skull, and it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but that shouldn't last any more than a week. But students, the practice they should be getting into is they set up their case in front of them. They open it up. While they're setting up the instrument, the first thing they should do is pour water into that reed cup and put the reed in it and let that soak during the process of assembling the instrument, seat strap, vocal, all those things. And the last thing they do after they sit down in their seat strap underneath them and bassoon in their lap, is to then pick up the reed, shake the water out of the inside of it, put it on top, and then play it. And even a professional bassoonist is one who will be soaking multiple reeds when they first set up the instrument, and will even test the reeds off of the vocal, figure out which one they feel like, okay, well, this is going to be my strongest contender for today, put that one on, and then begin their warm-up process.
Okay, so great advice. So at least the amount of time it takes to set up your instrument is the time that it needs to soak. And then having more than one reed available, because they're temperamental based on the day and the weather and all the other things you mentioned. So that would be another thing that would be very helpful for me to know. Students shouldn't just show up with one reed and see what's going to happen.
Yeah. Every student has a different background when it comes to socioeconomic status and experience, comfort level, all those things, as well as what resources they bring to school. But at the high school level, it'd be a good suggestion, I would say, to have at least 2 reeds throughout the course of a semester. But reeds do kind of last a while, especially if all they're doing in that instrument is playing it in ensembles. If they use reed 1 on one day, reed 2 on the other day, if they're kind of alternating between that, if that's what they're choosing to do, and they're having that success when they're doing it, they're probably going to have those 2 reeds at a mature and, efficient sound, a sound that they really like and they can control in the ensemble. That can last them a year. And, if you're investing from a reputable seller, about $20 a reed, and you're getting the 2 of them, you add in shipping, it's a $50 payment that, some parents are definitely comfortable with. Some parents may ask for a little bit of help of maybe if you can budget to split that between the parents at the beginning of the year, then that will give that student an entire semester of success, as long as they're treating the reeds well, all those things. That being said, when you move on collegiate, or even if you have a bassoonist in high school that really, really likes that and is looking into doing it in college, what I do is I have a case of 5 reeds right here. You can see these are like my go-tos. These 2 are from Miller. This one is from Miller as well. This was the one that I actually used for my graduate recital. And this is one that we made in studio. Shout out Krista for this beautiful reed wrapping color. That just it just looks great, and it's one of my favorite reeds to play on when I'm in a practice room. That being said, I do also personally carry some dead reeds, I guess you could call them. But, I kind of keep them in this right here that I kind of carry because you never know what could happen. So, like, when I go on stage, I'll bring this whole thing up, but I'll only be soaking 2 reeds. But let's say disaster strikes. My very first concert I did in college, the lead bassoonist cracked a reed in the middle of a performance and had a solo in that piece that the second chair bassoonist had to play. Because you never know what's going to happen in a performance or in a rehearsal. So if you have the ability to carry more than one, that's great. If your bassoonist is only able to get 1 or 2 reeds, they're not going to suffer. They just need to know their playing style, their rehearsal habits, which rehearsal habits does lead into the next step of what I would personally recommend after rehearsal. First thing they should do is take the reed off. And I would suggest, shaking out the water in the backside of the reed to blow out the excess water like that. And, maybe give it just a little light pat on the pants or something like that, just relieving it of some of that excess moisture. And then what I do is I put it in the case, and then just to encourage some of that, the moisture leaving naturally, I'll leave the reed case open while I wipe down, swab, and put away the instrument. And then once the instrument's done, then I'll close the case and put it inside of my bassoon case. Now, that being said, bassoonists are kind of forgetful. You're not a real bassoonist if you don't forget at least one thing to put away in your case. Usually the seat strap, you always forget about that because you're sitting on it, right? So you always make sure you put everything away. And then once you close the case, make sure you scan the section. Okay, did I remember my seat strap? Did I remember, my vocal? All those things. Are they all in the case? And then you stand up and you're just like, oh, I forgot my reed cup. And then you have to walk over and dump it out. It's just one of the fun charms of playing bassoon is always forgetting something.
Okay, that's very helpful. And my takeaway for sure is that even if I have to help the student or whatever their situation is, I need to make sure that they have a couple of reeds at their disposal. You want to have a spare because who knows, and they're temperamental and all those things we've already discussed. So I think that's a good takeaway for me. I don't know if I would have known that, just assumed that, it's like, okay, you have your instrument and there's a reed, so you're ready to go. That's very, very helpful. Okay. Love this part, talk about the reed. I think it deserved the amount of time we gave it. What else would you want me to know about the bassoon, about playing the bassoon, or something else that would be helpful for me to know as a director?
Yeah. So one thing I actually kind of get excited about this a little bit because this was such this level of insight when I was playing the bassoon, which is something I didn't really learn until a couple of years ago, is something that was just a complete breakthrough for me. If you're thinking back to your days of marching band, getting in front of the ensemble and really just, for lack of better words, commanding that the group play the same thing at the same time with the same level of quality all the time. Especially think about drum corps, where everyone is approaching it from a brass perspective of playing with a brass mouthpiece into a brass instrument. Take all that into consideration and you think, okay, what am I going to teach while I'm doing this? I'm going to teach 1, 2, breathe, play. And you're going to illustrate the idea that the air enters and it enters and it enters and it enters and it enters all the way to that 100%. And then in the second where the beat happens, that's where the articulation happens. That's where the buzzing happens. And that's when the air starts to exit, kind of this very clean and very even motion. And then the air escapes, same thing, clean motion. That approach to playing the bassoon really, I would kind of say, is not the very best one. And that was something, especially when it came to playing solo, whether you want to think about it solo in an orchestra or solo repertoire, that approach kind of began to pull away from me. But it was all that I knew because of how much marching band and drum corps that I had done. And really the thing that has completely turned around was to compress the air for a second, or as my grad professor put it, to sit on the air. And there's a couple of ways that approach can be made, but really a bassoonist double reed it. Not sure about the oboes as much, but what I can confidently say is that a bassoonist, what I've kind of found is that approach, breathe. And then to give it just a second to really sit on that air. And in that second, we're not talking like a full one Mississippi. We're talking just a split moment where that air is inside of my body and I'm sitting on it. I'm beginning to compress it. In that moment, I'm doing complete inventory of my embouchure all the way from the tips of my lips to the bottom of my diaphragm. Once everything is set and I've sat on it for just a millisecond, then, if you're thinking brass pedagogy, if you're thinking like that, back of the hand meets the front of the hand where the articulation begins and the air reverses, I'm thinking on a very, just anyone who's listening to this and isn't seeing the hands, you're really just kind of imagining a very, very careful and approach to just allow the air into the instrument as opposed to directing the air.
That is really, really interesting. And it points out another point that I'm learning from doing all these interviews about all the different instruments is that not all approaches that directors may be familiar with, especially if they're a brass player, are appropriate and work really well for every instrument. And so here's another great example where the bassoonist, the idea of sort of sitting on that air and preparing it to release it because of the way the instrument is built and the way the reed works. This is good for me to know, right? Because I think the bassoonist needs to know, okay, I'm getting this instruction, but I need to take this exception because of the way my instrument works, right?
Yeah. Every approach should be different, again, student-centered learning, instrument-centered learning, all those things. Now, it can be kind of hard to illustrate this to a new bassoonist. That being said, if we're thinking kind of on the idea of just this, it works because it works. Why am I blanking on the word? The pill, you take the pill and you think it's working, so it actually works.
The placebo effect.
Placebo. Yeah. Placebo. So this placebo effect for the approach, shout out John Gorder, because he does this sometimes in his lessons where he'll pull out his wallet and he'll give it to the student and tells the bassoon to hold it in their armpit, their left armpit, while they're playing the instrument. And that kind of adds some awareness to this like shoulder to lung area. And they're thinking about holding this area and kind of setting it a little bit better. And that kind of enforces the idea of compressing and sitting. Now, this is something that is not unique to playing music as a woodwind or brass, or even vocalists think about compressing their air sometimes, but really the best way I've heard it is hip hop artists and rappers. If you're thinking about the airiness that's part of natural speech versus when you compress from the diaphragm and you think about maybe that bottom 10%, you can hear how the voice changes. The air is going to do that a little bit as well. So try that wallet trick and just kind of see what happens. Because again, that awareness may give that player some maturity.
Okay, very interesting. So that idea of sitting on the air and that being a part of the beginning of the note for the bassoon is really helpful to know. All right, what else can I learn from you that would help my bassoon students?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've really found that kind of has broken the hearts of some bassoonists is realizing that bassoon playing is not just getting the easiest part of the ensemble, and then when they say, oh well, I do kind of want to play some more bassoon, like maybe think about playing it in a college or something like that, and then they realize, oh, this is some pretty tricky business, right? So from what I've kind of found, it really is that skill gap from going from beginner to intermediate, and then intermediate to advanced to professional. You're thinking all those different stages. It never really is a complete linear progression for any instrument. But I have found that for the bassoon, it really is much of the challenge happens at the very beginning. How do I get this instrument to sound right the same way every single time? And, different instructors have different approaches on what you should be thinking about and all those things. But really, it's getting the instrument to sound right every time. From that understanding, the bassoon really is kind of a fun and relatively well put together instrument that playing in an ensemble really is rewarding and enriching without being all that bad. But then you kind of cross into the professional level and you start shooting your goals a little bit more. And some students can be completely, void of direction, especially because the band directors just don't challenge them because they don't know what challenges a bassoonist deserves. So how do you address that? Well, any bassoonist, just as much as any other instrument, should have their studies and their etudes and their repertoire and all those things. The best way that I would put it, the book of scripture, the religion of a bassoonist is the Weissenborn techniques and etudes and studies and exercises, all of those things. Anything with Weissenborn's name on it is where they should be. And again, shout out to Terry Yule, because a student who has the 50 advanced studies for bassoon, there's a set that has the beginning bassoon in the front of the book, and then the back of the book is all the advanced studies. A bassoonist who has that book and has the 50 studies in the back will also have online for free Terry Yule explaining how the exercises should be approached and all of the hidden gems and techniques and demands of the bassoon. For example, what is flicking? What is venting? What is a whisper key lock? All those things. That will begin to transform the sound that they have in an ensemble, because the bassoon has so many unique things to the instrument. And we're thinking advanced techniques for instruments like multiphonics and glissando. The bassoon has so many steps that they need to take before getting to that. And all of it is in the name of getting the bassoon to sound right every time. Because, if you're looking at all the keys that are on this instrument, this is one side of the instrument. You double it on the other side. That's a lot of keys. And you're also thinking about the range of a professional bassoon. You're getting to the B flat below the bass clef, all the way to a professional is confidently going to play in E at the top line of the treble clef. Doing the math here. I think that's right. Yeah, that is a wide range. The
range is huge on a bassoon. That's what amazing makes it very versatile, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it versatile, but it also makes it fun, but at the expense of you have to work for every individual note. Every note has its own unique personality and characteristics. It's not as simple as adding a single key and then the sound changes completely. Like think about like the saxophone going from D all the way to C sharp. It is kind of that progression about either like lifting off of a key or switching one key for another, right? The bassoon, you will have one note that is two keys, and then the note above that, you're throwing down every single finger you have, and then the note above that, you're taking half of them away again. And that flip-flop progression can happen for a series of almost an entire octave. Now, with that being said, you are going to have bassoon players, depending on the model of their instrument, depending on what it's made out of. There are fingerings that are going to work for some instruments and some that don't. A lot of it boils down to what is the quality of the sound, what is the intonation, or again, most importantly, do you get the same sound every single time? I hope I'm doing a really good job of illustrating that it really just is, can this note be reliable? Because for how amazing this instrument is, it really is not a very reliable instrument.
Right. So you're having to sort it's what's interesting about this, Lumen, is it sounds very personal. Like all of this is very personal. You know what I mean? Like your instrument and the way and the type of it is and the make, and then you're gonna have to figure out certain fingerings might have to be adjusted for you to get the right sound you want on a certain note. And then you're talking about your own personal read and the way it works. Like it's very personal. I feel like this makes the case that bassoonists really need their own private instruction, or somebody else that plays bassoon really needs to help them, right? Like this is one of those instruments where I think you really need a specialist to help them figure out all of this sort of temperamental stuff you're talking about.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I would say the best thing is that, a bassoon is seriously going to help when they have that one-on-one instruction, but sometimes it's just as simple as you need a bassoonist perspective for that specific case. And I'll tell you what, if there are any bassoonists that are out there that are like me, we like our instrument, we like talking about it. If it's, hey, I've got this student and they've got this bassoon, and we just really need to know what the connections are to get that best sound in the ensemble. You probably have, from your undergrad program, if you're still in touch and if you're networking all those things, you may have someone from a program in your large ensembles when you were in college that played the bassoon that loves the heck out of their instrument. I would seriously recommend throwing a message out and being like, hey, so we have this bassoon. It looks like it says Schreiber at the top. I think it's made out of wood. And we have this student that really likes playing it. They're just having a couple problems with this note, and this note. Or maybe that bassoonist just comes in for an afternoon. You buy him lunch and you have him sit down with that bassoon player for 15 minutes. It's like, all right, play your chromatic scale. Let's see where your tendencies lies. All those things. You have something from your ensemble that you're confident playing, so I can see how that sounds. Now, in a perfect world, we all have a best friend bassoonist that we can just do for that. And, sometimes we don't. But really, the best thing is that a bassoonist is really going to benefit, previously mentioned, from that Weissenborn book, from those videos online from Terry Ewell. They're also going to benefit from some repertoire that complements their playing style, it complements their sound, complements their confidence. Weissenborn has a couple of solos for that purpose. I would also recommend, there are some books of short pieces for bassoons that are all in this one collection, some of which are solo arrangements of orchestral excerpts, like Perseus from Firebird, or arrangements of Sorcerer's Apprentice. What, a bassoonist doesn't like Sorcerer's Apprentice? That's many of our first introductions to the instrument, if not Peter and the Wolf.
Yeah, but I love what you're saying is there are a lot of resources. As you said, find somebody in your community or anywhere that can come and just spend a little time and have a little bassoon talk, right? And then also, as you mentioned, there's a lot of resources online that the bassoonists. But what's interesting here is this is different than a lot of the other instruments in that there needs to be a little bit of seeking and helping and extra help and finding these resources and getting them the right book and making sure because the bassoonists, they're sort of an independent lot, right? They have to figure these things out on their own, and they're in this cool special club, and I think it's really interesting. But I do think instructors and directors need to think about their bassoon students differently in the way that they're going to be able to get the information they need.
Yeah, and bassoonists are never going to need the same information every single time, but the best way I can put it is this instrument will make you want that information. Bassoon players, I have from my youngest bassoon student, who's 11 years old and just picked it up at the beginning of the school year, all the way to people who are post master's or doctorate programs, are still seeking ways to make their sound better, because they just really, really like the instrument and they're motivated by it, because of how fun and how charming it is. But because of the entry level to get into the instrument, that is what kind of turns most people away. And that does kind of remind me a little bit of this pipeline that I kind of found with all of my friends from my first semester of my undergrad all the way through my master's program, of when music ed majors are picking up the bassoon for methods classes, the first thing they think when they put it together and they put it in their lap in the first time is, oh my God, what is this? One of my friends said, you need alien hands to play this. And I can't really disagree with them. But then they start playing it, and then they start having a lot of fun with it. And they're like, oh my God, this is great. And I know many people who picked up the bassoon as a methods instrument, as a music major. And then they said, no, I like this. I want to do this. And they stuck with it. They switched their primary instrument. They started getting lessons on the bassoon. Or you have some people who are like, wow, that was a lot of fun. I can't wait to never do this ever again.
Right, but it is cool. Like, I think everybody thinks the bassoon is cool, and it's so versatile, and it does so many interesting things. And you've made a good point for that. Okay, so we probably need to start wrapping this up soon. Do you have a few more things that you wanted to mention? Anything else?
Yeah, I think one really big way, and probably this would be a good thing to kind of make the last major talking point, is again, it's a lot of fun. Students are going to be very motivated to play this thing, and they're probably going to want to get better at it. But of all the instruments in the ensemble that have longevity for playing this instrument, this is one that will err on the side of causing a lot of injury if it's not done properly. The only one I can think of the only other instrument I can think of that maybe matches in terms of the lack of ergonomics and the error towards injury is probably front ensemble with all the double mallet stuff. The only musicians I know with carpal tunnel that have gotten to the point where they're so young are mallets and keyboards. And this is one that, if not done properly, could leave you in a lot of pain. And, I would say if the first leading preoccupation of the bassoon is making the sound right every single time, the second leading preoccupation is how to make the most uncomfortable instrument as comfortable as possible. And there are some solutions, but again, every student is their own student and will have some things that work better for them than not. So the first thing I would say is starting from the seat strap, right? So bassoon players have a few different seat straps that they can use if they're choosing to use a seat strap, which again, if an entry level bassoonist is picking up the instrument for the first time, I would absolutely recommend a seat strap before anything else. A lot of instruments will have this belt, quite literally a belt, that if you're thinking about a chair, right, and the box of the chair, the left side, the seat strap should be near the back, and on the right side, the seat strap should be near the front. So it's at kind of an angle, and you should leave enough of the hook laying over the side of the seat to where you can hook the bottom of the bassoon. I'll show you right here. You can see at the bottom of the boot, there's little holes that they can hook into. And a student should hook that in, and they should let it sit to a place where you've got key work in the front, key work in the back, and you've got this middle area where nothing's happening. That section should rest on the side of the right thigh, and they should tilt the instrument over to the left side. All of this is to say that they should sit in a way where they can sit up nice and straight, airing middle towards the front of the seat, sitting up straight. And they should do so in a way, positioning the instrument to where, closing my eyes, I'm bringing the instrument up to me in a way that feels comfortable, right? We're making the instrument work for us. We're not going to sacrifice our posture ever to work for the instrument, right? We work the instrument for us. That's the first step. I myself have I have it.
Keep going. You're making a great point, which is this is one of the instruments, as you're making the point, where it's really critical that we teach the students early on exactly how to sit and hold it correctly, or they really could get hurt. So keep going. You're doing a great job of explaining this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I myself, when I'm in concert settings where I'm sitting down with the instrument, I have this is a Neotech strap where this actually clips around the back of the chair on the left side. You can choose to either clip it on the seat or on the support or whatever, but that, along with this pad in the middle, the seat strap is going to move around less. And you even have this cup that the bassoon goes into. There's also actually a napkin inside of it to kind of raise the bassoon up a little bit more. Those together, the cup is really convenient because I don't have to aim for the hook to go into the, I don't have to thread the needle, right? I can just, I'm up, and then sitting down, just grab the cup and then slide it in. So much faster, so much easier. That's what I do for my concert settings. Then it comes to standing up with the instrument, right? Saxophone neck straps, clarinet neck straps that just go around there and then have the hook. It's really, really tempting to do that for the instrument, for the bassoon, because there's a hook right here on the boot joint. And you say, 2 + 2 = 4. Well, 2 + 2 = 40 years of neck discomfort and possibly, spinal issues, things like that. The bassoon is so off balance. The bottom of the instrument is so much heavier than the top, and just like the sheer contraption that it is makes things so much harder. So if you're going to have a bassoonist using a strap, I would suggest a harness, one that distributes the weight more than just on the neck, right? The chest and the back, most preferably. And then I don't have it myself for the instrument, but they should be looking at a balance bar. My instrument doesn't have a hole in there in the bass joint right above the hook, but sometimes you can get what's called a balance bar that extends, just a bar that extends upward, that attaches to the boot joint. And basically, instead of the hook being right here, it makes the hook right here, which is the actual center of the instrument. This is right below the whisper key in a sense, and then moves back a little bit. And that is a much better place for the harness to sit if they're hooking the instrument in through a harness.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But again, I'm gonna call in a bassoonist I trust to check this for my students, right? I mean, you've explained it in a way that I could definitely check and say, are you making sure that these things are balanced, whatever. But again, I feel like this is a specialist kind of thing here, everybody. Like, we need to make sure we're setting our students up for success, not every day, but having somebody that is a bassoonist, that knows bassoon, to help your students get set up for success. You've made that point a whole bunch of times, Lumen, and I think that's sort of the main point to me, is like, they need to understand about reeds. They need to understand about how to take care of the reeds and how to have more than one. They need to understand about how to hold the instrument and set it up correctly so that they're not ergonomically, I know that some violinists, flute players can have all kinds of issues if they get into bad habits with the ergonomics of their body. It can really be a big deal. So here's bassoon is another one of those.
Yeah, for sure. And, very recently, getting on the education side of the marching arts, I've been very fortunate enough to work with Imperial Dynasty in Delaware. And one of the first things that we talked about in the staff meeting there was, if you don't know the answer to why you're doing something or whatever, one of the best answers you can give a student is, I don't know, let me find out for you. That is a much smarter answer than just either leaving them to find out on their own or making up an answer on the spot, right? One of the best answers you can do is, I don't know, let me find out for you. I think your bassoonists deserve that just as much as any other instrument, and some educators are fortunate enough to where, I've heard people say a lot, if you know one brass instrument, you know all of them, right? The transition from any of the saxophone instruments is probably a lot easier than maybe going from flute to trombone, right? Percussion is just a lot of rhythms or something like that. I don't know. That you have to speak on the idea that you're an educator, and we as teachers learn every single day too. So work for your bassoon students, because that hour that you pull them in for your planning period and really find out what their strengths and their weaknesses are in their approach will absolutely pay off for the rest of the year. And you may change their life, because that single planning period could possibly mean the difference between them continuing it after high school.
Yeah, it's a great point. So look, everybody, this is a specialist kind of thing, right? We need to have somebody that knows what they're doing. We can learn a lot. Like Lumen's explained a lot of things to us that we can watch for that I think are really, really helpful. But I say, find that bassoonist to come in, spend time with your students, and make sure that they're set up for success in all the ways that we've been, this sort of fickle, temperamental instrument that is ultimately worth all the trouble because it's so much fun and we love the sound and it contributes in such an interesting way to our ensembles in profound way, really. Okay, so Lumen, last question for you, and that is, you've sort of said it 100 times already, but I'm going to ask you one more time. Why do you love the bassoon? Why do you love playing bassoon? Why do you love the instrument?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us kind of equate music to being a voice, right? I really just kind of found that, we all say where words fail, music speaks. And a lot of us find a way to speak our voice through our instrument. And I think that for me, it's really been the duality of beauty and adversity, right? So approaching the bassoon is something that every second you take and you really meditate on what it takes to do things in a way that's proper, or at least, has a personality to it, right? It's been the kind of thing where the bassoon for me has always been equitable to speaking my journey, you know, to not necessarily getting it right, but for just working for something and allowing grace and prosperity through the dedication of something more than just yourself, right? So it's never been about the sound that the bassoon makes. It's always been about illustrating my story, and finding, especially through the medium of composition, through concert programming, through recording, all those things, taking an individual route of all the things that I like in music, right? So I like this bassoon, I like electronic music, I like deep imagery and, interlocking messages, going beyond the notes and rhythms, right? Like, why pick those notes? Why pick those rhythms? The bassoon really has just kind of been in the center of that for me, being able to record and perform as much as I have. And, not even the kind of stuff that you share with the world, just, for those 10 minutes a day where nothing matters, you put everything at the door and you pick up your instrument, and a single major scale can be like putting your hands together and praying, right? For me, that has been with the bassoon. I have found such excellence and such, I am so lucky to play music and to understand music through every medium that I do. But when I really begin to thin it out and to understand my center and my personality, I just really like the bassoon.
I love that. Thank you. That was so artfully said. I really appreciate that. And I feel like you're a great example of, I often feel like you can just tell when somebody has found their exactly right instrument, like it somehow, I think our instruments do match our personalities and like you said, your own journey. And I love that this makes perfect sense to me that you're a bassoonist, like, I think it's very cool. All the weird quirks and challenges and it all combines to make this great thing. It's one of the reasons we like making music.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. We're not in this for the money. We're not in this for the fame. I mean, especially bassoonists are not in this for the money.
Most are not. Yes.
Yeah. Are you going to choose between a new bassoon or a new car? Like, not many instruments have that challenge.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me, sharing all this great information. I'm excited to get to share this. And everybody, let's treat our bassoon students like the special wonders that they are, and let's get them the help and all the expertise that they need. So Lumen, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on here. I really loved it.
Make sure you watch for all the releases in this series, and we hope you'll subscribe here at YouTube so that you don't miss a single release. Thank you for watching.
Marching Arts Education is the home of the Marching Roundtable podcast. We give you access to the top marching arts professionals through live webinars, podcasts, videos, interviews, and online coursework. With over 1,000 podcasts and hundreds of webinars and videos, there are hours of great professional development for you and your staff. Sign up for a membership to Marching Arts Education to get complete access to all webinars, videos, and podcasts, plus discounts on coursework. Many directors are using professional development funds through their school or boosters to make these resources available to their staff. Imagine what you could do with so many great new ideas from the top professionals in our activity. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and sign up for our newsletter to find out about the latest podcasts, webinars, and new content. Find all of this and sign up at marchingartseducation.com.